Okay, so let's begin chapter 3, starting from Shlok 31. We read till Shlok 30th earlier, and chapter 3 is about Karma Yoga. So we are learning about what Gita says about karma or the action. Ye me matam idam nityam anutishtanti manavaha श्रद्धावन्तः अनसूयन्तः मुच्यन्ते ते अपि कर्मभिः ये तु एतत् अभ्यसूयन्तः न अनुतिष्ठन्ति मे मतं सर्वज्ञानविमूढान् तान् विद्धि नष्टान् अचेतसः. So in these two verses, Krishna is telling Arjun that all the people who, as per the divine guidance, or he's saying like as per my guidance, who do their rightful duty and stay away from any kind of jealousy or envy, they are able to free themselves with the attachment of the action or the karma. And those who fall into the jealousy or envy and who do not pay heed to these guidance or this wisdom, their efforts do not bring them any results, even if they have a lot of knowledge and a lot of understanding or gyan. So in this mix, Krishna is now trying to focus more on, by bringing in the jealousy, the envy factor, that, bringing in the focus on the self, like what is my rightful action instead of what others are doing or what they are getting out of it. It's like instead of looking outside and feeling that jealousy, connecting within self, connecting to that divine guidance, like what is it that is for me? And then just following that, it keeps you away from getting attached to the outcome. And I think there is something deep in there which will open up to us eventually. Because it's true, the more we focus outward, the more we focus on who is doing what, or they are studying this much, or they are doing that much, our focus is bound to go on the outcomes because that is how we are assessing others. Whereas when we are more involved and aligned to our own objectives, our own sense of purpose, we get a lot of contentment and a lot of joy in just in the process of doing, just in the process of getting aligned to our sense of purpose. And so although outcome come, but that isn't the primary reason why we are doing something. And then that also keeps us away from the sins of jealousy or envy, just because we are not looking that much outside on other people. सदृशं चेष्टते स्वस्य प्रकृते ज्ञानवान् अपि प्रकृतिं यान्ति भूतानि निग्रह किं करिष्यति. So he says that even the wise people work according to their own prakriti or their own nature, because every person or every jeev, or he uses the word prani, which includes human and animals and all the live beings on the earth, that they all are guided by these three gunas of sattva, rajas, and tamas, and then accordingly they have their own nature and prakriti. And accordingly, they have to action. What can somebody achieve by suppression? He uses the word daman. So he tries to say is that trying to alter your prakriti or your nature or trying to suppress certain aspect of who you really are not going to yield any benefit. So just go with the flow, understand yourself, understand your nature, understand your purpose, and then work according to that, because that will keep one away from any kind of attachment to the outcome.
Komal, can I ask you a real life situation here?
Yeah.
So, in my course of group coaching, I have been working with a person, not one to one, but in the space of group. That person is totally unappreciative of the rest of the group,
Mm,
doesn't listen, is only interested in her own sharing. I have, in my own ways, tried to make her understand these aspects. And lately, there has been a situation where she was completely unappreciative. And for the first time, it hurt me personally that this is not the right attitude.
mm,
Now, this person is reaching out to me for more support. Now, my first prakriti or nature, which you just mentioned, is to support her. I would have gone out of the way if this thought in my head of being unappreciative wouldn't have been there. Since 2 days, it's bothering me because that's not my true self. I want to support. At the same time, I want her to realize that this is not the right way, that you use people when you need them. You don't express gratitude or appreciation. And then, you move on. I want to somehow tell her I don't see there is a listening over there.
mm,
So I'm not able to say that. I want to support her, but I'm holding myself back from supporting just to maybe she'll realize that she can't take things for granted.
mm,
तो यहाँ पे जब हम प्रकृति की बात करते हैं, यही किया सारी जिंदगी, नेकी कर कुएं में डाल और आप जो करना चाहते हो वो करो.
mm,
But अभी कुछ दिनों से this is what I have done. It's bothering me. Had it not bothered, I would have been okay. कि ठीक है, तुम उसको कुछ सिखाना चाह रहे हो शायद. पर मुझे वो बॉदर कर रहा है, मुझे ये भी नहीं पता वो सीख भी रही है कि नहीं सीख रही है.
mm.
ऐसी situations life में so many times you face this, right?
Yeah. And again, if I take it to, there was this one verse last week that we were discussing that when you understand something, your task is only to follow what's your purpose. And if others are not seeing, then you can just continue to do what you are supposed to be doing, but without, getting too much involved into that suggesting, guiding, or critiquing as why you're not doing this. So the dilemma that you are in is like it is your nature to support and to do good and to help people, but something in the other person's behavior or the fact that they are not offering the same kind of space and compassion to other people is sort of coming in the way that should you just stop doing. So I would say just try and focus on what does support really look like for you. Does support only mean that you will listen to a person, or can you also support somebody by just keeping yourself away for a moment, by not giving them what they are asking you for? Because sometimes we feel like we can do good for people by just giving them what they need or what they want from us. But how do we know that if your easy accessibility to somebody is actually not benefiting them, but rather making them more rude or more entitled and is actually not bringing them the results, then it is better to bring yourself away from them. It's better to hold back, because even by holding back and not just giving them everything on platter, you are going to be supporting, not to their desire, but to their need, perhaps.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I mean,
So I think important is just for us to see that not giving my time, how does it look like to me? Does it look like I'm punishing somebody, or does it look like that this is what is required for that person to feel that I'm not accessible at all the times?
yeah.
Because even
Also,
though,
I think I need to, somewhere there is adulteration of my own little anger and desire to, not desire, but this whole thing that she should be learning. The critic in me is raising its head.
yeah,
I think if that I am able to deal with,
yeah,
then what you say will not look so bad to me. It's
yes,
my own ill feelings inside which have come to take place, and I'm aware of them.
yeah, yeah. So I think first thing is, like you said, it's a beautiful awareness that first to give yourself time to process your own feelings and let them go and come to a neutral space, and then see what your action is actually meaning to you, and then in that moment it that would be the right action to do.
Yeah,
Because we can, as parents or as elders, sometimes they even rebuke the children, of course, lovingly and in all their goodness of heart and wanting and willing the good for the children. And you one can also notice the difference. There are some people in our lives from whom we are even happy to receive a bit of harshness, because we know that deep in their heart they mean good for us.
absolutely.
So the action, I think, is always to be considered in its wholeness, like not just what is apparent and what we are seeing, but the intent behind that as well. Although it is a little challenging, because we always consider ourselves based on our intent, but others based on their behavior. So um, that can
But
be
I
a bit
think it's
challenging.
important to be honest to yourself. I
Yeah,
mean, even if the other person misunderstands you, as long as you are aware of yourself, it always helps you to pull yourself out. But right now, because I'm aware of my that, and I don't want to hold any sort of an anger or
yeah,
against anyone. So I think it's the anger
yeah.
bothers you.
So that's coming from the expectation that this person should show some result, some improvement, or some gratitude or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's move on. इन्द्रियस्य इन्द्रियस् इन्द्रिवस्व अर्थे रागद्वेषो व्यस्थितो तवो न वशम आगच्छेत तो ही अस्त परिपंधिनो. इसे प्रत्येक इंद्रिय तथा उसके विषय से संबंधित राग द्वेष को व्यवस्थित करने के नियम होते हैं. मनुष्य को ऐसे राग तथा द्वेष के वशीभूत नहीं होना चाहिए, क्योंकि ये आत्म साक्षात्कार के मार्ग में अवरोधक हैं. So he says that every sense and every sensory element has got its own nature, like they have their own quality or capacity to create some sort of attachment or some sort of a dvesh, or a detachment, disassociation. And so one do not need to be guided or governed by those qualities or capacities, because if you fall prey to those elements, then they come in the way of the self reflection. And so when he says indriya, that means all the senses, and indriya vishaya, that means the objects of those sensory perceptions, like when we see or when we hear or when we feel or taste. So all of that has their own ways of creating attachments or uh, detachments from subjects. So basically he's asking us to be aware and understand, see it very clearly, and not get indulged in those impacts, and stay in the mode of self reflection, self assessment. श्रेयान् स्वधर्म विगुणः परधर्मात् अनुष्ठितात् स्वधर्मे निधनं श्रेयः परधर्मः भयावह. I love this verse so much because it does speak to your own swadharma, or your own rightful action or your purpose. He says that when you are aligned with your own purpose, even if you're not perfect in that, even if you do it badly, that is thousands times better than trying to become perfect with something in something which is not your purpose, which is not your dharma, or which is not your karma to follow. That means to try and achieve perfection in some space which is not your purpose is not going to bring you. He uses the word shresht, and shresht basically means excellence. So there is no excellence in trying to put your energies in trying to chase perfection in something which is not your rightful duty, which is not something which is aligned according to your own nature or your own prakriti. And he said, do your own deed, and even if you do it badly, that is better than trying to be perfect in something which is not your rightful. And somewhere this also sort of indicates on striving, because how would you be better in something which is not aligned to your own purpose or your own nature? You would be striving a lot, you'll be doing a lot of hard work, you'll be going out of your ways, and it'll be a constant strife, which will be more associated with the ego, because the power or the fuel or the drive to strive as much and trying to be better in something has to come from somewhere. And if it's not coming from your true nature, it has to come from your sense of ego, and that comes from attachment of any specific outcome. And so he says that it is better to follow what is your rightful duty, because there your energy to act or your energy to do good is coming from your essence, your true self, and not from any outcome focus or anything outside of you. Exactly. Exactly, Manmeet. We see it so much, and that's why I think it's so difficult for a lot of people to understand and follow. And even for us, because when we start to work on it, the mind constantly goes to and fro, and feel like, but how everything is going to happen? But what we do not realize is that nature has its own ways, and because we are also part of nature, if we follow our natural element, alignment, and tendencies, then we also flow with it. Then there is no striving, then there is no hard work which is required. Of course, you need to put in your action, but that would be very natural, very normal to us. So
But
then,
Komal,
yeah,
sorry,
no, no, go ahead.
I think we have discussed this previously. I think I did discuss this with you only during this session.
Mm-hmm.
Our whole culture is designed for this. In fact, when you're not striving enough, it looks very unnatural to us. It has become so much part of our DNA that you feel something is missing. How come you're not striving? Like, I think the moment you step into school, you have your report cards coming, they are evaluating you on such finite goals, in such short phases. I mean, an 8-year-old, I mean, what is that child really you're reporting him or her for? He, the child is still evolving. And even when you are grown up, you're still evolving, yet we are judging on the basis of report cards. So that's the first in you're getting ingrained that you got to strive, you got to prove something, and there is nothing called nature. You have to take things into your hand and you will be judged. And if you are not up to the mark, you will lose out.
Yeah,
And you're also called lazy, not hardworking. So many labels are given to you. And this doesn't stop till the report cards. Then comes your job scene, where your assessments and appraisals are happening quarterly basis. So the whole design is flawed.
yeah,
One person in the whole system feels very doubtful that am I the idiot who wants to flow? Very few people have the courage to walk out of that system and let themselves flow. And yeah, they do excel. If even if they don't excel, who cares? They sleep well, they flow, they enjoy their life. They are who they are.
yeah. You're right, Manmeet. And it's such a shame that the systems around us we've created in such a way that we give all the emphasis to looking outside, to focus on material things outside of us. So much so that even when you choose somebody to get married, your parameters are all very exterior based, very external based, like what work somebody is doing, how much they are earning, what status or what potential or promise of a future life they give you. So instead of really being aligned to who the person really is. And that is the reason why the life around us, we see there is so much of misery. There are so many physical diseases, there are so many mental illnesses which people are going through. All of that is happening just because we have somewhere forgotten to live as per our nature and to uh, look within us and try to understand that who we really are and how should we really be living. And this is again the question of Arjun in the next verse, where he asks Krishna, Ath ken prayukto ayam papam charati purusha anichannapi varshaneya baladev niyojitaha. He says, like, hey Krishna, why do people, even if they don't want to, why are they motivated to go towards misery, or he says pap karma, like not the right action? It seems to me like there is some force which is just forcing them towards those kind of actions. Something akin to your question, which you just said now, Manmeet, is also Arjun's question here. Like, why does it happen like that, Krishna? That even if somebody wants, it seems like they are forced to go towards the misery. And so Krishna then explains it to Arjun. काम एषः क्रोध एषः रजोगुण समुद्भवः महाशनो महापाप्मा विद्वेयेन महि वैरिणम. Krishna says, hey Arjun, its reason is the calm or desire that arises because of the rajogun or the rajas gun, which later on converts into anger, and which gives rise to all the kind of miseries in our life. So he tells him that it is the Rajogun which is responsible for this kind of illusory or this kind of a forceful attention to the things. So he'll explain it further, like how it happens and what really it is. धूमेन आव्रियते वह्नि यथा आदर्शः मलेन च यथा यथा उल्बेन आवृतः गर्भः तथा तेन इदम आवृतम. He says, जिस प्रकार अग्नि धुएं से, दर्पण धूल से अथवा भ्रूण गर्भाशय से आवृत रहता है, उसी प्रकार जीवात्मा इस काम की विभिन्न मात्राओं से आवृत रहता है. So he brings in three metaphors here. One is of fire, then is of mirror, and then is of a what do we call bhroon, the baby inside a mother's stomach, or in uterus. Yeah, I'll read it again. It says, धूमेन आव्रियते वह्नि यथा आदर्शः मलेन च यथा उल्बेन आवृतः गर्भः तथा तेन idam आवृतम. It says, like, just like fire is covered with a lot of smoke, and mirror gets covered with a lot of dust, and the embryo or the little baby is covered and protected by a mother's uterus. Similarly, Jivatma or our soul is always sort of covered, is always covered with different kind or different varieties of what do you say, coverings, or say parda or whatever. Now, one thing which I find really interesting in these metaphors is, and we see it, right? We are not able to see a fire clearly when there is a lot of smoke. So it's like the fire is hidden behind the smoke.
Komal, is it at what's happening right now?
What happened?
Please
So
carry on.
yeah, so he gives metaphor of three, like when there is a lot of smoke, we can't see the fire clearly, or when there is a dust on the mirror, we can't see our image clearly. Similarly, the little child or embryo stays in the uterus covered with the mother's womb. And somewhere he says that similarly our atma, or the light of consciousness that we have inside us, is covered with all of these layers. And although we may feel like, oh, like this is bad and these layers are there, what Krishna really is trying to pull our attention is that he says that whenever there is a smoke, there is a hint of a fire, that without fire there cannot be smoke. So which means that wherever there are these impurities that are distracting us from looking within and the rightful action, there is always a light within, there is always a fire behind it, there is always a clarity of vision behind the dust. So it is it is again up to us how we view it, right? So, do we see only the impurities, or we take a hint that behind these impurities or behind these layers, there is actually the light of consciousness which is prevailing? So, he says this is how it is, that all of these pure gunas or the prakriti is covered with, a whole lot of um, this stuff which is actually not, which feels like actually is not useful, or which is there to just deviate or distract us from what is the truth. आवृतं ज्ञानम एतेन ज्ञानिनो नित्य वैरिणा काम रूपेण कौन्तेय दुष्पूर्णे पुरेण नालने अनलेन च। इस प्रकार ज्ञान में जीवात्मा की शुद्ध चेतना उसकी काम रूपी नित्य शत्रु से ढकी रहती है, जो कभी भी तुष्ट नहीं होता और अग्नि के समान जलता रहता है। So somewhere it says that the presence of these attachment, desires, or calm is something very normal, and which is there, which means it is always there. It's always present with all the jivatmas. So, and where it sort of, so the sense it is bringing to me right now is that uh, there is no point worrying about, the desires, because they are pretty much a part of uh, the nature. Because where whoever we are here, nobody is perfect in a one kind of gun. So we are all a different combination of sattva, rajas, and tamas. And if we have these rajogun, so we are predisposed to have these desires. We are predisposed to have certain elements within our nature, which are like a smoke to fire or a dust to a mirror. And so instead of focusing as much on that, like why there is smoke, he says if we can focus on the fire, and we can consider that there is this light within, and that despite of all of those desire, we pay our attention to the light. Exactly. It's like, there's a saying that whatever you pay attention to grows in your life. So if you are paying more attention or thinking more about the desires or the negative qualities, even if you are critiquing them, even if you're saying that, oh, this is not good, you should not do that, you're actually giving a lot of energy and attention to that thing. So instead, if you start paying more attention to, you know, what is the light, what you really want to have more in your life, you do that. And it reminds me what you just a while back told me about your joy journal.
Hmm.
Isn't it like that, that now that you have started to paying attention or writing, being very conscious about it, like what is bringing me joy, so it is going to go and expand more and more.
It's so true, but it's very interesting the way you just said it and explained, Komal. Uh, so when you see smoke, you get so engulfed and trapped by the smoke that you totally forget that there is something out there because of which this is happening. So when it comes to Atma,
Yeah,
so even me in my language, I'm becoming aware. I keep saying so many layers, I need to remove them, unpeel. But why am I not focusing that if peeling is required, there is something out there. So why can't I constantly talk about that instead? The Atma, the light I have. And when I'm talking about my joy journal, so if I'm feeling sad, sadness is existing because there is a joy out there. There is darkness because there's a light out there.
yeah,
So I'm not going to forget this now because
yeah,
when I'm wandering, I'll remember that if I'm wandering, there is a center also out there which is pulling me. So
exactly.
let me go back to that center. Let me go back to my Atma.
And that is so lovely that you've shared it, because that is precisely what is the essence of Raman Maharishi's teachings, or Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj and their ways of, focusing on the being, or who am I question. Because, and what this example says is that where there is fire, there's going to be smoke, and where there is smoke, there is definitely going to be fire. That is the duality of the world. So if there is sadness, how do we know that there is sadness? Because we know happiness too. But what is happening right now is that in our consciousness we are focusing more energy on sadness, more attention to sadness. So that is why we are noticing it. And who is noticing it? Everything happens, everything takes place in this consciousness, right? So without this consciousness, we can't even notice sadness, we can't even notice happiness or joy. So, in a way, in a very, very deeper way, it's trying to bring our attention to what is real and, what is changeable, what can be shifted. So, this feeling of, or this focus on sadness can always be shifted to focus on something else. Just
And
yeah.
do I have the liberty to read Kabir here?
Oh, absolutely.
So it's not really directly to what we are saying. But when you say that what we focus is going to grow, and it's in whose hand? It's in our hand. That's what reminded me of this small couplet of Kabir. He says, "Ghat ghat mein panchi bolta, घट घट में पंछी बोलता, आप ही डंडी आप तराजू आप ही बैठा तोलता, आप ही माली आप बगीचा आप ही कलियां तोड़ता, सब में सबपन आप बिराजे, जड़ चेतन में डोलता." It's
Yeah,
all self-created.
absolutely. Absolutely. And then it feels like, a child's play. Like sometime you've adopted some role and enacting and playing and feeling it. And then on the other time, you become something else and then experience it. And this reminds me, Mirza Ghalib's ghazal also, where he says, Bazi chai atfal hai duniya mere aage. The world
होता है
is a
कब रोज
tamasha mere.
तमाशा मेरे आगे.
Yeah.
I'm
This,
also beginning to see that Gita, Kabir, Rumi, Khusro, and all the poets who came after, they all are saying the same thing. It's just that the bridge bhasha, sometimes it's Urdu, only the language is changing and the form is changing. They're saying the same thing.
yeah, so truth is the same. It just gets packaged differently.
Yeah, and it's up to us to arrive at our truth as whenever we have to arrive.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody and everything, like whoever has reached that truth has reached it by just moving within, looking within, instead of looking outside. So Krishna says next, Tasmat tvam indriyani ado niyamya bharat rishabh papmanam prajahihi enam jnana vijnana nashanam. So he says, हे भरतवंशियों में श्रेष्ठ अर्जुन, प्रारंभ में ही इंद्रियों को वश में करके इस पाप के महान प्रतीक का दमन करो और ज्ञान तथा आत्म साक्षात से इस विनाशकर्ता का वध करो. So now he's brought in a different kind of war or different kind of fight for Arjun, where he says that right in the beginning, have the control on your senses. And paap ka mahan pratik, he says, to the desire to come, like desire uh, is the is the great symbol of misery. That is what Buddha also said, that desires are the cause of misery. And he says, just have your senses in your control and kill the desires with the help of the correct understanding, gyan, and self reflection, Atma Sakshatkar, meeting yourself and knowing yourself. इंद्रियाणि पराणि आहु इंद्रियेभ्यः परं मनः मनसः तु परा बुद्धि बुद्धे परतः तु सः. इसे कर्म इंद्रियां तथा जड़ जड़ पदार्थ की अपेक्षा श्रेष्ठ है. मन इंद्रियों से बढ़कर है. बुद्धि मन से भी उच्च है और वह आत्मा बुद्धि से भी बढ़कर है. Now he's sort of telling him what's greater than what. He says, Jad Padarth, that means this physical world or whatever is existing as a physical reality in this world, the karmendriyas, like the senses of action. So just like we've got five senses of perception, which are our eyes, nose, ears, skin, tongue. Similarly, karmendriya or five senses of action, like our hands, our feet, our voice, our genital organs. These are the karmendriyas or the sense organs through which we do the actions. So he says these organs of actions are greater than the physical manifested world. Man is even greater than these organs of action. And then he says intellect is even greater than the man or our emotions and thoughts. And then even greater than this intellect is the Atma or the consciousness. And somewhere this also sort of describes the panchakoshas or the five koshas which are explained in Taittiriya Upanishad, which says that our consciousness has got these five layers of three different bodies of the causal body, the Karan Sharir, um, Sukshma body or the subtle body, Sukshma Sharir or the subtle body, and then is Thul Sharir or the gross body. And the five layers, which are one is the Manomaya, first of all, is the Annamaya Kosha, which is like the body which is made of, constituted, constituted of the different food that we consume. And the food is not just the physical food that we eat, but whatever we consume in terms of content, in terms of seeing, listening, the words, and all. So, this physical body is the most exterior layer where all these karmendriyas are. Like these action happens because of our physical body. And then he says, Man is shrisht or is bigger than. So, after the Annamaya Kosha, which is the most exterior part of the body, there is Pranmaya Kosha, which is the layer of the body formed out of our breath. Then inside that is Manomaya Kosha, or the body where our emotions and our thoughts arise from. Then inside that, the fourth layer is called as the Vijnanmaya Kosha or the intellect. And then the most innermost body which envelops our consciousness or our Atma is called as it's in English it's called joy. Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanmaya Kosha, and I've forgotten the Sanskrit name, but that body is actually the joy and bliss. So he says, and then is the inner consciousness, which is the greatest of all of these subtle or gross body layers that we are born with. So in this one verse, he sort of takes him to what is the the most significant way of being for us. Evam buddhe param buddhava संस्तभ्य आत्मानम आत्मना जहि शत्रु महाबाहो काम रूपम दुरासदम. इस प्रकार हे महाबाहु अर्जुन, अपने आप को भौतिक इंद्रियों, मन तथा बुद्धि से परे जानकर और मन को सावधान आध्यात्मिक बुद्धि से स्थिर करके आध्यात्मिक शक्ति द्वारा इस काम रूपी दुर्जेय शत्रु को जीतो. So that's the last verse of the third chapter, where he finally asks him that know your real truth, that you being the true consciousness or you being Atma is your greatest reality. And so knowing that that is your true reality, detach yourself from all of these physical senses, sensory perceptions, and thoughts and emotions, and even intellect or distinction of all of those things, and then do your rightful action. And so that's the ultimate of karma yoga. Like, how do we really detach ourselves from the outcome of things? It's when we get to know our ultimate reality. And it is so true. If we continue to feel like, oh, I am this person who has this name, and so I would start to face the challenges of that particular level. And some people who are not as much stuck to their physical reality but are more identified with their emotions and their feelings, then the feelings get them stuck because they can't see themselves as outside of certain feelings that they hold. Some are more stuck with the intellect. But the true reality of our being is this pure consciousness that we are, is the fire behind the veil of the smoke. So I said, know that and then do your action, fight the fight.
Interesting.
And once I had this epiphany. I'll try to share it with you. I don't know whether I'll be able to explain it or not. When I see this, that our true reality is this consciousness, that is the truth. And that consciousness is all pervading, which means in you, it's the same consciousness that is your truth. And then there are those layers of body. In me, my reality is the same consciousness, and but then the body and mind and emotions are just different layers. So it's like it's the same entity having all these different experiences in different bodies. And so if I come close to that ultimate reality, then what I understand is, Manmeet, that like it's like I am in your body living like Manmeet. You in this body are living and experiencing like Komal. We in some other body are living and experiencing like somebody else. And when I come to see our reality like that, there is no space for jealousy, there is no space for envy, there is no space for seeing, oh, what somebody else is doing well. The same consciousness is having a different experience in that body. And it's the same consciousness having a certain experience in my body. So then what is the point of having so many different bodies? Because as many bodies and as many different experiences. It's like the permutation combinations, right? Like some scientific experiments, it's the same sort of um, chemical poured in different test tubes with slight deviations, slight differences, and saying, okay, so what happens in this experiment? So it's like the consciousness is having this experiment with all us humans, and with just slight changes and alterations, we turn out to be different people. And so it is up to us whether we keep stuck in the reality that we see and perceive externally, or we can learn to actually connect with the real truth in each other and the people around us.
I
How's that?
so resonate with you. And the only difference is that I don't use the word consciousness, I use the word energy here.
Energy. Yeah.
And I often think of us as how we were like the Pangea, one big continent. I've always thought that were the real us. There were no borders, there were no divisions, and these are borders between countries and continents. Then there are borders between us and you, but we are the same energy, and these are such false borders. And yes, once we look at all of us as that one energy, where is the scope to stab, be angry, envy? Mm, It's
That's what,
like being children of the same mother, right?
yes, that's exactly what Krishna says, is that those gunas, because those gunas are of the elements, the elemental nature has those characteristics. So once we get to understand them, or once we get to notice and experience them, then we say that, oh, okay, so anger is happening too. So instead of saying that I am angry, I would say that I'm experiencing anger.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they teach you in narrative therapy. That's you are not the mind. You have a mind.
You have a,
You are not the emotion. You are experiencing an emotion.
yeah.
And I also, these test tubes, which are us, I think there's only one thing that holds us back is our fear that we may not survive, we may fall out, something will happen to us, that we refuse to get out of the test tube. Otherwise, if we the moment we let go of our fears, we become one with each other. So it's so much of the fear of survival that makes us separate from the other, try to do better than the other, try to gather things, hold things, not share things.
This
And
is,
this line which I just read from Kabir, Komal, it's saying exactly the same thing, right?
yeah,
सब में सपन,
yes,
सब में सपन आप बिराजे, जड़ चेतन में डोलता. सो जैसे ही आप सेल्फ में गए, जड़ चेतन में गए,
yes,
you are roaming around like a pendulum, and whereas we all are one.
exactly. And with that fear thing, also, I would say, again, with the fear as well, it's the same thing. It's not my fear. I am experiencing fear because, and an interesting and a different tangent to this whole thing was for me, my question was something else. Like, I got this, that, okay, so that's the ultimate reality. But then I was like, then what is the need of this self or this ego? What purpose is it really serving? And I realized that that is pretty much associated with this organism, right? With the boundaries of this particular organism that I am. And the benefit of it is that if I lose this sense of boundary or this sense of self, like I am in this body right now on this earth, then I really can't make out the difference between what is my experience and what is somebody else's experience. And it does happen with a lot of people whose sense of boundaries is compromised, maybe because of the way they've been brought up. It becomes really chaotic. You cannot distinguish between what is the experience which is taking place in this body or what is the experience which is actually taking place in some other body, but I'm sort of feeling it and absorbing it and imbibing it. So while it brings a very important knowledge and awareness about the fact that it's actually we are all the one, that is the ultimate reality, there is still a lot of value, because on this earth, in this plane where we are living right now, having a distinct body with certain boundaries serves a lot of purpose. But the only thing is that we do not get involved so much in it that we just forget what is our ultimate reality. Like knowing our ultimate reality, still continuing to enjoy in this body, live in this body fully, completely, the way we are supposed to. And it took me a little while uh, to get a sense of that, this distinction between the ultimate, the truth, and the truth right now in this body. Truth in a certain limitation. So that's how I got to understand this.
I'm going to ask you to begin the next session with this only because I'm going to mull over it. So far, I don't see the purpose of this body except when I am down to my Jad Chetna, where I am operating out of pleasure and sensory pleasure. So far, the only little piece I have found is by getting into that ultimate truth. But seeing the purpose of going back and forth, I'm not very uh, really I've not been able to understand so much. I find it very limiting, the body and the mind both.
Hmm.
Doesn't give me the sukoon I'm asking for. It's only in the ultimate truth. When I lose my sense of self, that's the only time I experience the bliss.
Which is okay, which is how it's bound to happen because the mind and body do have a limitation. It's
Then
like,
I'm not able to enjoy my mind and body, right? Komal, where you are, I
yeah,
would like to arrive there because still I'm alive. I'm going to be in this limited mind and body. I
yes,
better crack the formula and let not the matrix take over. The matrix is, it's, I'm in the video game. We talked about it.
yes,
So, so now I have know that this is the video game. I better know the all the buttons.
okay.
So let's begin the next session from here and talk a little bit more. Maybe next verses also throw some more light. This was really, really insightful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a better journey when we walk alongside.
Grateful. Thank you so much.
All
Lots of love.
right. Good night.